Hello! Welcome to the Sweet Tea Shakespeare Hours, where we spend time well by spending it together. I'm Claire Martin.
Hello.
Hey.
Hey. It's Monday.
It's Monday. Well, it's Tuesday.
No, it's Tuesday.
It's at the
That's
end
how
of
I'm
June.
doing.
I don't know how we got
Forgot about
here.
it for a minute. I'm so
It feels like a
nervous.
Monday to me. And yeah.
Y'all.
Monday was so extra. We had it twice.
Jeremy sent me one of his most iconic text messages yesterday. Just in the middle of nowhere, he sent me one. He was like, "Oh man, Monday is its own type. Like Monday gets its own Enneagram type."
Oh, that's so
True.
That is so true. So true. It's like
Worst.
August.
It's like
August
Monday
is
is
like
a
the
2.
worst month.
Monday's a 2. It's the worst.
Mondays is- Oh, Jeremy.
Man, someday this podcast is gonna drop. Like people are gonna be able to download it as a podcast, and everyone's gonna be twos, and they're gonna start listening, and they're just gonna stop because they're gonna be so
Yeah.
offended.
We're not welcome. Yeah, no, it's true. We love you. We love you, twos. We love you.
We do actually love you.
We do actually.
And
Jeremy just has some issues with
I would
them.
invite any two to come sit in on actual live therapy with me, and we'll discuss two-ness together, and you'll understand why I feel the way I feel.
He's
Probably
kidding.
because you're a 2.
It's very possible.
Yeah.
It's very possible. So I listen on the side. I listen to Enneagram podcasts, and like the one I listened to, I was driving actually to a Shakespeare competition in Southern Pines. I was going to be a judge, and I was listening about the Enneagram 2, and it's the only time I can recall where I like openly wept on my way. And like what this guy had to say was very, I identified with it very much. So it's, I wonder.
Well, we're going to
Anyway,
talk
we're
about
not on
twos
Tuesday. We're
today.
on 8s.
Well, they're connected. So that'll come up. Yay, 8s. Claire, are you excited?
I know. I'm
So
excited.
you're saying
I'm
I
also
could move to
very-
8 in stress?
I'm nervous.
Mhm.
I'm afraid that I'm gonna feel very attacked today. Not by you intentionally, but
Yeah.
like by the overall tenor of the discussion.
You will
That's,
not be attacked. It may just feel like you're attacked.
Everyone feels attacked, first of all. And I will tell you, so I just had a conversation with my husband. I married an 8, so I know a little bit about them. I was like, what do you think? Who do you think the Shakespeare, characters are that are like you? He was like, well, all the a-holes, and villains. Because he feels like every time he's heard the 8 described, he resonates with it. He's like, yep, that's dead on.
Yeah.
But it's
me.
always the jerk. Like it's,
Yes. Always.
I don't know about you. When I think about Claire Martin, I think villain.
do you?
No, I don't.
Thanks
I
for
don't.
that.
I
Actually,
don't think
okay.
villain.
We had all the serial killers on the 5 episodes, so it's fine.
But
I
I
get
mean,
it.
Donald Trump is an 8.
Did we decide that?
Oh,
I-
yeah. Oh, yeah. He's in there.
I thought he was I thought we said he was the entertainer. I thought he was a 3.
Oh, he could be a 3.
There's a lot of
3.
discussion about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not
The
supposed to type other living people, right? We get away with it
It's
because
Donald Trump. We can say whatever we want.
I have FDR on my list of 8.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
I'm
see that.
going other way.
This listing has Donald Trump, has Clint Eastwood, Tommy Lee Jones,
Oh, fun.
Russell Crowe,
But I-
yeah.
Sean
Okay.
Penn.
This is terrible. Like I'm not enjoying this. Can we find someone cool?
I would just say if I'm a 2 that moves to an 8, we have a good deal in common. We have like some behaviors that are
Yep.
overlapping in our Venn diagram.
There's
Well,
definitely some connection there.
I share your feelings potentially to some degree. I mean, it could
We're
be
just
that I'm a
gonna,
4 and have nothing to do with you, but let's pretend that I'm a 2 who moves to an 8, and that way we can have something in common for a minute.
Actually,
honestly,
4s do have a little bit in common with 8s. But
Oh,
our
well.
4 company members. Can you imagine stuck under the combined manic leadership of 2 like highly insecure 8s, or I don't know, a 2 that presents like an 8 and an 8 that has like a 3 complex
Mm.
and a lot of cynicism. Like this is just not good.
you guys are just making up your own system. I love it.
To be fair, like what I actually do this was, I think Jeremy and I talked about how it was hardest to dig up fives, right? Like that was the day that we struggled the most to come up with characters from any of the plays that really seemed to fit a five. This was arguably the easiest day. And it's not because I'm an 8, it's because 8s in Shakespeare, and I think 8s in literature and theater in general, they just manifest pretty early on. Like they're pretty identifiable because of the way that they act. And so this was a much easier day to sort of like hash out my list. But I'm a little anxious about what we're gonna hear, and
all right.
I should say that I don't know if I'm an 8 or not, but that some people out there in the universe, Jacob French, think that I'm an 8.
But I know I'm an 8 wing 7. I know I'm not 8 wing 9. I know I have that 7 wing. Like when we were talking about 7s the other day, there was a lot of what you were saying that was like really resonating with me. Yeah. So I know I have a 7 wing.
I see that. I also am curious about that, Jeremy, because a lot of times 8s are one of those like, yep, that's my type. Like it's very easy. Like Claire's just saying, it's easy to identify the characters. If the type 8 is like resonating, it is very, very clear. I don't see a lot of people struggling unless they're struggling between like 8 and 3, right? Or like 8 and 3. I don't know if you guys are listening and you're an 8, let us know. Did it jump off the page at you? Was that an easy one to like identify, or was it a bit more of a struggle? So you guys ready? We'll hit some high notes and then we'll jump into y'all's list because I'm sure we have lots. Okay,
fantastic.
So 8s are often called the challenger, or the leader, the protector. I like the rock. I like that. The asserter, provider, maverick is another name. They're big-hearted. They're focused on honor, respect. These are all kind of like qualities that they just kind of espouse. They are the first number in the body triad. So now we're moving away from the head triad, from the 7, and into the 8, which is in the gut or instinctual triad. So these folks are going to understand their world just from knowing it, like in their gut, right? This is your pure instinct-driven sort of folks. And 8s are really, again, they're super strong characters. We talked about this briefly with the 1 because 8, 9, and 1 are all sitting at the top of the diagram. So we touched on the body triad really early on. We're coming back to it. So the emotion that they have the easiest access to is anger.
Oh,
so
gosh, I'm an 8.
Stop.
Oh my God.
I spend 23 hours and like 58 minutes angry every day.
Okay,
it's very okay. All right, we'll come back.
Okay.
So anger is easily accessible as opposed to the heart triad, which has shame, and then the head triad, which
also
has
true.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. So we're talking about anger and your response to anger, the way you manifest it. So 8s externalize their anger. 9s kind of detach from it or are sort of dissociated from it. And 1s internalize it. So those are some ways to think about this within that same triad. 8s are some words to describe like a healthy 8 are heroic, self-surrendering, self-reliant. They're very strong leaders. They kind of are always looking out for the underdog, pragmatic, direct, resourceful, intuitive. They can see potential and they're often extremely generous. And then unhealthy-ish 8s are always kind of, they feel like or are told that they're often too much.
Yep.
They're very intense.
Yep.
Can be perceived as aggressive. They can be controlling, dictatorial, intimidating, not necessarily on purpose, just because their sheer presence often is just strong. Their energy, like you can literally feel an 8 when they walk into the room. I don't know. That just to me, it's like, it's a thing. They can be defiant. They're very preoccupied by like trust and betrayal. Who can I trust? Who can I be vulnerable with? Yep. Their core desire. So they're back to their, core motivation. The reason that they do everything that they do is to protect themselves. It's just, there's no getting around it. They kind of had to grow up too quickly, right? So they often feel like being vulnerable. And Claire, this is where I'm going to tiptoe because I don't want you to hear it. A lot of times there's just some sensitivity around this. They feel like exposing themselves or being emotionally vulnerable is extremely dangerous. So they don't. right? So that's where all of this projection of power comes from. It's in order to protect themselves. So their core fear is of being vulnerable or being controlled. So they don't necessarily need to be in control. They will if there's a vacuum of leadership, right? They'll step up as long as they can, figure out somebody's got this under control. Cool. I'll let you lead. It's not like they need to be the leader.
Right.
But if there's any kind of vacuum, even in our conversations, I've seen you're like, okay, we're not driving on the right direction, or like, let's go, let's stay focused, right? Because you're like, I don't need to be in charge, but I need to know there's a plan, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So the passion or the emotional struggle that eights experience is lust, and that's not necessarily sexual. It's kind of a lust for life, like everything. They need everything to kind of match their own energy, right? Like the stuff that they're exuding and externalizing, they're kind of always on the lookout for that in a similar way in everything that they experience. The fixation, the mental fixation that gets in their way is vengeance. So this can be, again, this has to do with the betrayal aspect, sort of, concern.
I've done vengeance today. Today, I've done it.
Oh, Jeremy, be nice.
No, I mean, I have done it.
And also be careful what you say. We are live.
Not like, yeah, I mean, but like.
Did you go slash somebody's tires? No.
I did not like that.
Okay, so they are in the reactive group, as you could imagine. So when they're dealing with conflict, they react, and they're seeking independence from that reaction. So they share that with the 6 and the 4. So 8, 6, and 4 all kind of share in that reactive group. The way in which they get their needs met is by being assertive. So they are actually moving against people as opposed to moving away or working with. They're moving against. It's like it's a push for their autonomy, right? So they're going to push through the crowd or push through whatever obstacles in their way in order to make sure that they still have their independence and their autonomy intact. The wings on either side, which Claire's already kind of touched on, we've got an 8-wing 7, which remember 7 is the enthusiast. So when you combine those two in that way, you get the independent. So these folks can pull from the 7's charisma. They're quick-minded. Remember, the 7 is in the thinking triad. They attract others. They kind of are like this charismatic force that people are kind of drawn to. They're very action-oriented. And they often have really big plans. And they can kind of follow through and push through. Yeah, to make those things happen.
Oh,
in contrast, an 8 with a 9-wing is called the bear. So the 9 is the peacemaker. Oh, Jeremy, we might be getting close. All right. So the bear, or the 8-wing 9, is way more laid back. Mm-hmm. They kind of had this combination of strength and quiet groundedness, right? So they're warmer, they're family oriented, and they're super duper protective, and really steadfast, right? So I'm pretty sure that my husband would probably resonate more with the 8-wing 9. He's fine. Just don't poke him, right? That's yeah. So there we have the wings, and then we'll talk about the movements, and then we can move on. So you guys remember there's, the interconnected lines throughout the whole Enneagram. The 8 connects with the 2, which is the helper, and the 5, which is the observer. So their heart point, or the growth point for the 8. So when life is going well, they're not under stress, they're able to integrate, they can pull into some of the traits of the 2. It'll help open their hearts and help them connect with some of their emotions, because they are, remember, their heart repressed. So their main center of intelligence is the body. Their supporting center is the head. So they can rationalize their intuition, but they have a hard time connecting with their heart. So being able to then move to 2 in growth or integration helps open that up for them and allow them to be a little bit more vulnerable, and kind of find a tenderness, which I think is important. And that's one thing that I, bless him if he's watching, my husband, seeing him around kids or dogs is a very different dynamic than anything else, because he can be tender and kind of go back
with kids.
I like kids and dogs better than I like humans.
Well, that might be a thing. Yeah. So in stress, the 8 can move down to 5. So 5 is the observer anchored in the head triad. It's kind of a big move, all the way down at the bottom of the diagram. And remember, we can do this in 2 different ways. We can do this on the high side of 5 so that you can make an intentional move, or you could do this in a disintegrated way and kind of do it out of stress and automated, which is a low move or not a good move. So on the high side of 5, pulling into, when the 8 goes to 5 in a good way, it can help them slow down.
Yeah.
8s are always kind of moving. They think they do first, think later, right? This is where a lot of our marital conflict comes from, because he's very like decisive and I am not.
I like that.
So I have to research. And so I always say, like, I get analysis paralysis, but he gets buyer's remorse. So like if we're buying a fridge, he's like, let's just get that one. And he'll get it home and then he'll regret the purchase because he just did it, right? Whereas I will spend 3 weeks researching the best refrigerator, and I don't have buyer's remorse at all because I know I made a good decision because I did all the research for it. So moving to 5 can help them slow down, pause, get perspective, and exercise restraint. In a low move, in a not so healthy move, it actually causes them to pull away.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I'm going to take my ball and go home. Like, nobody's going to play fair. The system is rigged. I'm out. They can question themselves and kind of lose faith in their intuition.
Yes.
Which is painful and really sad to see this really like powerful force kind of sink back down and withdraw, and kind of they can see betrayal in more places too. And then like we call it refiling people, right? Like you just got refiled, and it's done. You're dead to me, right? Like you don't necessarily, like if there is ever a betrayal, that is not taken lightly. That's not something that you can really easily move through. And then you can start to kind of wall yourself off in the way that a 5 does. So those are the movements. I don't know. How are you guys feeling about that?
No, you just described something I want to ask questions about.
Sure.
But I see Claire has something to say first, so go ahead, please.
I don't want to be vulnerable. Like now I can like articulate why I don't want to say this because I don't want to like be vulnerable. But when I first started going to therapy, it was because I was in such a bad place that I was getting stuck in like thought spirals. Like I would get stuck on one thought and I would just like withdraw into myself, and I would just like my head would spin and I wouldn't do anything productive and I wouldn't want to talk to anyone. And I was like, I felt like I couldn't trust myself. And that was so terrifying because I always like have faith in myself. And I felt like I just couldn't trust what I was seeing and hearing. And I was just stuck in thoughts. And it was like, that was why I went to therapy, was so that I could like, it was my therapist who was like, okay, well, this is what's happening and this is what you need to do. And it was about sort of like dropping down into the heart region, right? And like opening up what was, and just like nothing, every single thing you've said has resonated with me, except for like the honor and heroism stuff. Like I feel heroic and I don't know that much about honor, but like everything else was like, I feel so exposed right now.
Well, we're being tender. When it comes to like, when I'm thinking of, the heroism, it's so 8s are very they're very concerned with justice. There is fair, and then there is not fair and effed up and screw the man, right?
Okay.
Like, yeah. So I see it that way.
Okay, great.
My husband,
I was going to say, Claire, there's some heroism going on there.
We were watching, I think it was like Handmaid's Tale, and there's some pretty deep topics and things. It's very oppressive. Like Andrew can't even watch that movie. It like physically upsets him. He's like, he knows it's fictional, it's just dystopic, whatever. He was like, so he can't even engage in that as like entertainment, like even separated from it, because it literally gives him a physical reaction. Like he like cannot handle it.
That I vibe with. And it's so funny you say that, Jeremy, because I'm actually interviewing, the person I'm interviewing right after we do this is the only person in my life that I've ever met and been like, oh, you could be a superhero. Like your alter ego could be that you're a hero. And so I just feel like, because I know him, I'm like, I can't be a hero because I have this person as my like ultimate example. And I feel so different from that person. I'm like, no, like they've got the lion's share of that. I just yell at people and get angry.
I'm sure it's still there.
The justice thing though, if that's kind of how it manifests, then that I absolutely resonate with that.
Yeah, there's always like a looking out for the underdog. Like who is the most disadvantaged in this situation? And then we're gonna stand up for that person. Like it's beautiful to see. I mean, you can see it on playgrounds with little kids even. You know what I mean? There's always that kid that like stands up for somebody that's getting picked on. Like probably there's some eightness in there. Cause a lot of, most other, it's hard to stand up and go against the crowd, but eights don't really see that as an obstacle. It's more of like, it's a compulsion. Like, no, this is not okay. Okay. And it's and again, they're also very black and white. So they kind of share that with the ones, like it is good or it is bad. It is right. It is wrong. There is no gray. There's discussion. Like it is one way or the other.
Yep. So, okay.
Yep.
What did you want to say, Jeremy?
I want to say it sounds, this is about going like withdrawing into 5, but it sounds like 8s live in the fight part of the fight or flight response until they don't. And then it's like total flight, right?
It's almost like, what is the other? Is it fight, flight, or
freeze?
Fawn or freeze?
Freeze.
Well, I don't know if it's. I wouldn't even. I don't know. It's hard. That's hard because it's like, it's almost. It's not fleeing. Like it's not running away. It's just I'm done engaging. Like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. All right. So I have 2 people I really, really, really want to make sure we talk about, or I want to make sure I talk about, but I think we should do like lists first because I'm afraid that if I start talking about either of them, we won't get to anything else. So who do you have, Jeremy, as an 8?
Are you saying that 8s take a lot of air up in the room?
Sure. I mean, that's something that's been told to me my whole life. So yeah.
Okay.
Aww.
I'm going to say, so here's my list. Charles the Wrestler, As You Like It. Dr. Pinch in Comedy of Errors. I've played Dr. Pinch as an 8. Brilliant. Ghost
and humble.
Ghost Hamlet.
Yeah.
The Douglas.
No, I think the Douglas is
a 7. Maybe it's informed by a production I saw where the actor said the line, "I am the Douglas," as 8E as you could get, and it was pretty fantastic. I think the Dauphin and company, a lot of those French people are written as sort of 8s. I mean, it's an effete version of it, but like it's that 8 team, the blue 8 team versus the red 8 team, and
interesting.
I don't think every single one of them is like that, but I think they're sort of like pushing, and it's a big iconoclastic evil. Even though iconoclast is one of the other like subtypes we talked about. Anyway,
but 8s can be iconoclastic.
Oh sure.
Well, that's the 5-wing 4. So you're talking about a movement to 5 there. Yeah.
Pistol 8. So you said this name in an earlier episode. I can't remember which one, but this may be informed by a performance I saw of these plays. But I think the Earl of Warwick is potentially an 8, a real like a Braveheart-ish type. This like leading the charge and all of that. Henry VIII is Henry VIII.
I still think Henry VIII is a 3. I stand by him as a 3.
Okay. And that's fine. I just think, we get into the chopping of heads and things like that, and I get a little nervous.
I think he's like Donald Trump. I think he's a 3 with a, ridiculously inflated ego and like anger issues.
My list says Donald Trump is an 8. So this may be a good opportunity to learn about the difference between 3s and 8s.
And 8s.
You can do that. All right. Yeah. So the type 3 versus the type 8. Many 3s think they are 8s, but the opposite is less common. So 8s don't typically think they're 3s. The kind of distinguishing questions is whether or not you care what others think. So 3 does, an 8 does not. Practical results or huge results. 3s don't mind big results at all, but they also get a great deal of satisfaction from getting positive results from their efforts, big or small. From the 8 perspective, results need to be big in scope and bigger in impact. They don't like to bother with small tasks and items. Go big or go home.
Sure.
And then the last one is conforming or rebellious. So a 3 is more likely to be conformist, and the 8 wants to break the rules because that's why they were made.
Okay, I concede, Jeremy. Donald Trump is an 8.
Yeah, but I think that first question of the 3, I think he scored an 8 twice and a 3 once.
3 once. I agree with that. The first question,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, I got this in the bag, and then you kept going, and I was like, oh no, maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To be fair, he doesn't care if everyone likes him or approves of him.
Right.
He wants a certain group of people to like and approve of him. So I feel like it splits the difference almost.
Yeah, and some of 8ness strikes me as sort of a they're concerned about legacy and like the mark that they're going to make in the room instantly, but also across their lives.
Yep. Oh yeah.
And like when you have the Trump brand
Stop
name, that's part of the thing, right? Like that's the stamp that they want to make, and that's what leads me to Henry VIII, who was not just interested in like leading the kingdom, but he wanted to change religion forever, as an example. And that's also why I put down Julius Caesar, who is arguably that, but could be other things. I mean, in that play, I think he's not very 8ish, but they talk about him like one.
Like he is, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And
totally. I had a question mark next to him on my list.
Yeah, and I certainly think he's concerned with the legacy things, not directly, but like all the stuff Mark Antony reads about his will and things like that seem to be that Julius Caesar is concerned about his long-term brand post-death, like the Murdoch family, like the Trumps, like, you know what I mean? And to that end, I think because he's the messenger, and we brought him up many times before, I think Mark Antony is an 8 potentially in that play. Maybe, but he's not in Antony and Cleopatra.
No,
Absolutely
I think he's a 7 wing 8.
Could be, yep.
But I don't think he's an 8.
Yeah, I don't think I disagree with any of that.
Hello! Are you enjoying the episode so far? Then you should consider joining the Sweet Tea Shakespeare Patreon community. As we gear up for another exciting season of shows, concerts, and events, we are issuing a challenge to boost our monthly Patreon sustainer giving. For a pledge of as little as $5 a month, you can ensure that Sweet Tea Shakespeare can continue making delightful content all year round. You can also buy a season ticket that will grant you access to all of our exclusive Patreon content, along with reserved seats to every one of our performances. For more information on season tickets, check out our website at sweetteashakespeare.com. To join our Patreon community, you can find us at patreon.com/sweetteashakes. Thanks so much.
So I have Margaret, 8.
Yep.
Constance, 8. Although we've talked about her before. I think she presses.
We have.
I can't remember where. I think Bastard, and we've talked about him before, and I've named him in another number, but I think he could be an 8 too. I think Eleanor could be an 8, and if all of that's true, that's a really interesting. Yeah. There are just lots of 8s in King John at play. I think Lear could be an 8. I think I've mentioned that before, him as another number 2, but that legacy thing seems to be part of his concern. You're free to disagree with me here, and I think we've mentioned him in another number, but Holofernes in Love's Labor's Lost really takes up a lot of space and really, really presses at times, takes over projects and all of that kind of thing. I think he fits in other places too, but I think he takes up a lot of air.
I think he might be I think that might be another one of those, because I think we talked about him as a 3. I think that is one of those, like, he kind of presents like an 8, but I think in his heart, in his true motivation, those questions that Kelly asked us, I think Holofernes is a 3.
Okay. I have Elbow in Measure for Measure, who's this like little, like, spicy little cop figure. I think we've named him before, but I wonder about Ford from Merry Wives of Windsor being an 8.
That's what I had. I don't know why we talked about Ford before. I think Ford's definitely an 8.
Yeah, he's got a lot of energy. I have Theseus as an 8.
Yep.
I have Titania as an 8.
Yep.
And I think it's really interesting when productions double those characters as opposed to
Yes.
the other way.
Yes.
Leonardo, although I think I've mentioned him before in another area.
No, I like him and his daughter as twos. I think that really works.
Sure. And 2 moving to 8 when he's in stress certainly makes a lot of sense. Beatrice, 8. Don John, I'm not really sure because he plays something really darker in a lot of things, but maybe. I mean, he is a villain, and I don't know, maybe. I'm less comfortable with that. Brabantio and Othello, 8.
Yep.
Antiochus and Pericles, 8. Capulet we've mentioned before, and but he certainly has a whole scene where he is doing nothing but sort of taking up space and screaming at people. And
my ongoing theory that you didn't ask for, is that in writing that scene with Juliet, Act 3, Scene 5, where Capulet goes off the rails and suddenly becomes the character in the play that talks the most, I think writing that scene in whatever 1594, 95 is when Shakespeare was like, I gotta write King Lear. And it took him a while to get around to it, but I think that writing that scene with Capulet is where he was like, now there's something.
Yeah, the rage. He taps into it really, really well.
The male rage specifically to a daughter, right? That dynamic.
And that's one of the only plays I've seen, Shakespeare play, well, any play, where the screaming Capulet got a standing ovation in the middle of the play.
For yelling at his daughter?
Yeah, it was really well delivered, I guess. I don't know. I know we've mentioned him before for very good reasons, but there's I think there are some Tybalts that present as 8s.
Yeah.
Kate.
Yeah.
Titus. I mentioned him earlier too, but I think because we're talking about serial killers as number 5s, but
you brought him up as a 7. I think he's an 8, wing 7, but I think he's an 8.
Sure. Okay. Tamara, I think, is an 8.
Yeah.
So this is a place where we can disagree because you've mentioned it before, and I think you're actually right, but I think there's some 8ness to Toby, anyway, Thurio in Two Gentlemen of Verona, I think is an 8, but a really weird one, and it presents as like, I don't know, it's sort of floppy, but that character, but takes up a lot of space. And Leontes, that's my list.
Okay.
What about you?
Going straight down, all's well that ends well. King of France. He makes some weird choices in that play, but he seems, all things considered, a pretty well-adjusted 8, actually.
I wonder if Shakespeare wrote all French people as 8s. It would be an interesting theory to go back into.
I stand by Catherine of Valois in H5.
Okay.
Because she has an irrepressible in that play. As you like it, Rosalind. I think Roz is like me. I think she's an 8 wing 7. And that's one of the reasons. She and Hal are the 2 that I want to talk about, but Roz was a really important character to me growing up. It was Rosalind in As You Like It, and Emma Woodhouse from Jane Austen's Emma were such pivotal heroines to me because they were outspoken and self-assured, and they had they're just no insecurity and no kind of anxiety about being liked or being wanted, which is nothing I ever felt growing up. I felt really secure in myself, and I wanted to lead, and I wanted to make things happen. And I think that you could make the argument that if Rosalind lived today, she would be a theater director. You know what I mean? She's the actor manager of her own happiness in that play. And the fact that she and Emma were so dynamic and assertive, and they had flaws and they made mistakes, but they chased after what they wanted. And it wasn't always a man. Sometimes it was freedom, or sometimes it was to bring other people together, to lift up people who were disenfranchised. Both of them have these big hearts and big visions, and they're bold women, both of them. And I think Roz is an 8, and I think that's a gift that Shakespeare gave us all these years later. Comedy of Errors, I have Dromio of Ephesus. He's the servant that actually lives in the city, and he's got way more self-esteem than his twin. In Cymbeline, I have the evil queen who doesn't get a name. of course. From Love's Labors, yeah, I disagree about Holofernes. I do think Constable Dole is an 8, but the problem is I think he's an 8 that got a shitty education, so he has trouble like keeping up with the wordplay of everyone else, but I think his personality is that of an 8. In Measure for Measure, I also had Pompey, but I think Mistress Overdone is an 8 in that play, and I also think Barnardine is an 8. And if you have the right actor playing Barnardine, he can sort of steal the show. From Merchant of Venice, it's interesting. I know you had mentioned him before, and you may be right, but I think Lorenzo might be an 8. And I think that might be...
Yeah, he's certainly got the social justice warrior piece going in that play, I think.
Super driven, like in a way that Bassanio and Antonio kind of waffle. He's very driven, and I wonder if that's part of what attracts Jessica to him. That he's just like he's so kind of fearless in going after what he wants. I don't know. I happen to not like Lorenzo, but I think he might be an 8. In Merry Wives, I also had Pistol. I think in Merry Wives, Nim also is an 8. I don't think he is in the Henriade, but I think he is in Merry Wives.
I agree.
From Midsummer, I had Theseus and Titania, and I also wanted to talk about how my favorite productions have doubled those two as opposed to Theseus and Oberon. So that's great. For Much Ado, I have Beatrice. I also have Borachio, the one that's like, oh, I'll sleep with Margaret to play a prank, and in the meantime, like, I'll get paid for it. Borachio, like, arguably, I mean, he doesn't get away with it, but he almost gets away with, like, the biggest coup in Shakespeare. Like, he basically gets paid whatever. I don't know what 1,000 ducats is in modern money. It's a lot of money. He gets paid, like, arguably thousands of dollars to have sex with someone he was going to have sex with anyway. Like, he almost gets away with, like, the best heist in Shakespeare. Pericles, yeah, I have Antiochus. I also have Dionysa, who's the evil queen in that play. Shakespeare. From Taming the Shrew, I have Kate, and I also think Petruchio, and I think that's why that play is what it is. I think they're both 8s. I didn't have.
I do think. Well, I was going to say, if I'm stretched a different way on Petruchio, it would be that 3 problem that we keep having.
Yeah.
Because he is there to sort of achieve. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. No, I think that he, depending on the cut, like the cutting of the script that you're doing, you could probably play him either way. From The Tempest, I have Antonio as an 8, maybe. From Troilus and Cressida, I have Diomedes and Priam. Again, Troilus and Cressida, everyone's pretty despicable, but those two in particular are like, ugh. From Twelfth Night, it's interesting. I don't agree about Sir Toby. I kind of get where you're coming from on that. Like, I can see it, but I don't think Toby is an 8. I think Maria is. I think she's the it's what Kelly was talking about, how 8s, there's a myth that 8s like feel like they have to be in charge. I don't actually feel that way. Like, I have been the dramaturg and the assistant director of directors that are so good at what they do. They've got everything under control. They got a great vision. Like, I love working under their leadership, and I'm like totally happy to just sit back and be quiet and do what they need. Like, I feel that. I'm totally fine with that. What I hate is when the director doesn't know what they're doing, or when they're just totally out of their depth. And that's when I'm like, I need to step in and help.
I need to fix everything. Their incompetence makes me angry. It puts me into a rage.
And I think that's Maria, right? She's like,
Go, you finish, and then you finish. Go.
She doesn't need to be in charge, but when she sees there's an opportunity for a prank to be played, she's like, okay, you idiots aren't coming up with anything creative. Here's my clever plan. And she takes charge because she sees a vacuum of like, how are we going to deal with Malvolio? And steps in. I think she's an 8.
And I would just say, I think she's a 2. And that's why I'd like to learn about the difference between, because I know they're connected, right? The line connects them, but I'd like to learn about the difference between the two of them. I just see her as full of resentment.
One thing I have jotted down is that 8s have an aversion to weakness. And that is
Yes.
insane to watch. Like I was reading some book and I was reading it out loud to Andrew one day. I was like, oh my God, you literally do this. Like there is eights can walk into a party. What, remember, same scenario, we're walking into a party. Like they just kind of exist. Like, and not necessarily that they need to take up all the air in the room. Like a three, thinking of a boardroom meeting, right? A three would be like, wah, 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 I'm in charge. I'm here. Look at me. Right. Versus an eight who has a presence that doesn't have to be verbalized, but they are there, right? It could just be like just a facial intensity, actually physically taking up space. But also like we've gone to parties and Andrew like will meet his friends and he is physically touching and like manhandling people, like in a cordial, like friendly way, like patting people. I'm like, sometimes I feel like you're literally like feeling to see how muscular they are. Right? What is their strength to you? What are their weaknesses to you? Like, and it's not like in this hyper machismo thing. I mean, I guess it could be on some level, but for the most part, it is like literally his own sort of gauge. He has to gauge what the like levels of strength and weaknesses are in the room.
That is hitting home right now. That situational assessment stuff.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So tell us about the difference between 2 and an 8. Yeah.
So the questions here, well, there's gender stuff to be discussed. And I think, Claire, you definitely hit on this. I mean, it's a lot of times women are penalized for being eights, right?
Thank you. Yes.
100%. Like, so in the same
true.
way that we want to mistype or kind of stereotype women as twos,
Yes.
there's this added sort of like pressure to be more two-like, and being a female eight is really tough.
Yes.
Because the world just kind of isn't set up for that, to accept that. It's interesting that he would write characters that were strong in that sense, but that probably adds its own sort of layer of drama to it. All right. Let's see. Leadership. So twos will step into leadership, especially the social subtype of two. And remember, some of them do appear more like eights, but they don't seek it out, nor do they feel compelled or born to lead. An eight feels like they were born to lead. There's an instinctive ability and desire to get things under control and move people and activities forward. Yeah. The next question is on decision making. Do you trust your head, your heart, or your gut? Right. So that's obviously the two is going to rely on their feelings, and the eight is just going to have this instinct or gut feeling about making any decision, like buying a fridge. Right. And the third question is your relationship with anger. Twos don't really get that angry, and eights use it. Like, and it's weird to see. It actually is unsettling for me because I'm kind of sensitive to emotional variances. Like it kind of does make me uncomfortable to be anywhere where the temperature is heightened, right? Because I have a pretty even sort of steady state. Andrew can like, rah, but then he's done. Like it's it, right? It doesn't fester. It just needs to like blow, like it needs to just erupt. And it could be as stupid as like he stubs his toe and he's like, yelling. Whereas most people are just kind of like, when I stub my toe, I'm like quiet and like, oh God, that really hurt. He's like, rah! I'm like, oh my God, what just happened? Right. I'm thinking like the house is falling in on us. Right. And really it's their outbursts. It doesn't mean that they're angry. Like it's over. Once it's over, it's over. But it's just there. It's like at the surface, and that's kind of their easiest way to express themselves.
I think
so. It's not that they're angry, awful people. It's just that's the closest thing they have to be able to kind of vent.
They just burn hot.
They burn hot. Yeah, I like that.
That's it. Yeah, I can see it. I see her sort of as more of a behind the scenes agent in that play. Still really active.
But she's happy. That's because she doesn't need the whole world to see her as a leader. She just needs them to take her plan and run with it. Okay. She has the leader's plan. She doesn't need like all the credit and glory for it. She just needs them to do it. And she is always about like pushing it forward, pushing the plan forward. And you said she reminds you of a two because she's got all the boiling resentment and like all the anger, but like that's an eight.
Yeah, but I mean the resentment is like not, because we don't ever see her boil over, I don't think, on stage anyway. I do think it's like a little bit in that scene where she comes to sort of quiet them down from the party, but it's nothing like Malvolio's, right? If you look at if there's a rage comparison in that play, she does not burn as hot as Malvolio does. And part
But
of the way,
but she doesn't have the status. She doesn't have the status to boil over as much as he does.
well, in that room, I think she does. In that room, I think she does. I don't think she does like when Olivia's in the room. I think it's got to be more controlled and more reserved when she's in the room. I just see her as sort of having sort of resented her life to a certain degree, and that's why I read the two, because I think twos are the worst. Anyway, here's a question. We have had a question submitted.
Yay!
So I would like it's from someone we know, and this person asks, Kelly, how does the concept of being an empath fit in with the eights supposedly having a hard time connecting to the heart?
I would love to hear an eight speak on it. So Claire, I might actually defer this to you, but in my understanding, in my experience with eightness, I don't see not that I don't see a ton of empathy, because that's not fair, but I think that is a very evolved skill for an eight to have, if they do in fact have it.
Yeah.
Okay. So the eights that I know are not empaths.
I don't know how you could be. I don't know how those motivations would line up with that.
So the problem there is the vulnerability, right? Like you're not only making yourself vulnerable by absorbing the emotional energy of another person, but then if you're trying to be empathetic to someone who is extremely vulnerable, how would you be able to? You would have to have done a lot of work to be able to get there, I think.
I have a theory.
We're heart repressed.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have to strive. I have to strive to empathize. I have to remind myself to slow down and stop working on the goal and think about the people and how they're feeling. I have to force myself to do that emotional labor. It doesn't, empaths just like bleed it. They can't help. They empathize without having to do that work of attempting to empathize. I don't know how you could be an eight and have that.
I do know
simultaneously.
I do know threes that are empaths, though.
Yes, that
just throw that out there.
That I can see.
I have a theory that and I'd be happy to talk about it with this person, and I'm by no means an Enneagram expert. That's Kelly. She's a 5. But I suspect that if you felt like you had resonance with the eightness and that you are an empath, that you're probably more likely to be a 9 with an 8 wing. Because nines like identify with all of those parts, and they're kind of known as the peacemaker, and like they merge with other people based on the room, but then they do have this not defensive, but like defending, fierce place that they can go to on the side, and that's how that's how I would maybe describe that thing.
I like that, Jeremy.
Are you keeping the person's name mysterious to us for a reason?
Oh, well, she's now says I can call her out, so it's Ashanti.
Okay. I'm going to finish, unless we have another question, I'm going to finish my list.
I don't have another question.
Great. So from 2 gents, I have Thurio. I also have Proteus as a really badly developed 8.
Yeah, he's real interesting. We can come back to him if we have time.
Yeah,
I have questions.
And I've been thinking about 2 gents a lot because I'm doing a radio drama in August. Winter's Tale, I have Polixenes as a possible 8. He's definitely got the authoritative father thing, but I don't know if that's just because his son is acting out or if because he's actually an 8. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if it's the circumstances of the play or if that's who he actually is, but he might be an 8. From the histories, from the Henriade, we've got Thomas Mowbray from Richard II. Also Ross in Richard II, the one who's like, hey, Bolingbroke's landed on the coast, like, let's go meet him and do a coup. Prince Hal, who I want to make sure we talk about, my son, my disaster. Also from the Henriade, Lord Mowbray, who is Thomas Mowbray's son and behaves almost identically to his father. Like, if dueling was an option in Henry IV Part 2, I'm convinced Lord Mowbray would be doing it. He would be like, let me duel in my father's place or whatever. From the Henriade, I think the Dauphin is just too narcissistic and petty. I think he's like a 3.
I think the Constable of France, though, is an 8. And I think that the Dauphin gets on the Constable's nerves so much in that scene with the French because the Dauphin's ego is just so out of control. And the Constable's like, we have a job to do. Like, we're here to do battle. From the Wars of the Roses plays, I can see Warwick. Also, I think, and Margaret of Anjou, obviously. I think Suffolk might also be an 8. Because the impression I get of Henry VI as a person, like my sweet child, who I definitely know is a peacemaker, like Henry VI is 9, is I get the impression that like part of his hell is that he's surrounded by 8s. Like he grew up in a court of 8s, and that's his lot in life. Is he can't contend with them. So he's got Margaret and Suffolk, and Bishop of Winchester, who's not an 8, but the bishop is like big personality, and he's just got so much assertiveness around him, and he's so quiet and like introspective and thoughtful and sweet, and all for the bad. From King John, Eleanor, yes. Constance, probably. The Bastard, definitely. King John, do we think John himself is an 8? Do we think it's just a play about 8s?
Yeah, I think he could be an 8, and I think he's that 5-wing 4 iconoclast potential.
Sure,
too. Yeah.
Sure. From Henry VIII, I don't have Henry VIII. But I see where you're coming from. I have the Duke of Buckingham from that play. From
all
ANC,
Buckinghams ever are 8s. All Buckinghams. That's why they stopped making them.
From Antony and Cleopatra, I think Cleopatra might be an 8. She's an 8 with some skewed priorities, but I think she's an 8. From Coriolanus, I think Volumnia is an 8. Which is I think the key to everything. From Hamlet, I don't know about the ghost. I can kind of see where you're coming from. I feel like I don't know enough about the ghost to say one way or another. But the character I see as an 8 from that play is Fortinbras.
Sure.
And I think that that's why the ending happens the way it does.
He literally takes up space.
Yeah, he's the only one who could survive the inanities of that family, right? Is like he comes in at the end and he's like, okay, so they all destroyed themselves. I have a plan. I have an army. I have so like I ooze strategy and assertiveness, and like I'm gonna clean up this kingdom. Like I'm gonna get us back on track.
Do you love the arts? Do you love Sweet Tea Shakespeare? Then you should consider being a guest on one of our podcasts. For more information, get in touch with us at hours@sweetteashakespeare.com. That's HOURS at sweetteashakespeare.com.
From Julius Caesar, I agree with you that Julius Caesar is not characterized as an 8, but I think everyone else talks about him like an 8. You can see flashes that he might have been very 8-ful in his younger days. I think the real Julius Caesar, like the historical one, was definitely an 8. And I think that was deeply threatening to the senators. From King Lear, I agree about Lear. I think Regan and Cornwall are 8s. I think that is just that marriage is what it is because they're both 8s that are like into BDSM or whatever. And then
I played Cornwall once. I agree.
Yeah.
He rips eyeballs out. He literally takes eyeballs out of someone's face. It's gross. That's very 8-ish.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I saw Claire do it last week.
But to defend my 8s, because I am an 8, I think the King of France in King Lear is an 8. When he steps in and says like Cordelia, like I'll take you with no money, no land, no dowry, like you speak truth to power, you're courageous, you're kind, he steps in and he's like, I'm gonna marry you even so. I think he's an 8. I
might put him on my 9 list, and we'll talk about him tomorrow.
Well, he's got that justice thing. He's got that stick up for the underdog thing.
Yeah.
The girl he's been courting suddenly becomes an underdog, and also he loses all of the political and economic capital that comes along with her. And he's like, but the right thing to do is to marry the girl who is worthy, and that's her.
Plus, keeping him as an 8 would underline my theory that all French people in all Shakespeare are 8s.
Woo! From Mackers, I think the doctor who who's like, let's fix Lady Macbeth. I think he's an 8. He's kind of a useless 8, but I think he's an 8. I think Othello. Don't you think Othello is an 8? Like, where would we put him if he's not an 8?
So
I mean,
like,
Andrew
what
had
would
a.
he be?
Andrew gave me
he's
2.
the bear
and that
if
was
he
one of
is.
them.
Yeah, he's 8 wing 9 if he is. Yep. That's my theory.
From R&J. Yeah, I mean, I think Capulet is a 2 that goes to 8 in that scene. I think the one who I disagree about Tybalt. I do think I think Tybalt is a 6 still. He's just a very sort of violent 6.
So that's
then,
the counterphobic 6.
Yeah.
And 8. Mm-hmm.
And then from Titus, like definitely Tamara and probably Titus, because I can't see Titus as anything but an 8, but he's weirdly gleeful. So like 8 wing 7 maybe. The one that I care about is Henry V.
Yeah, so let's go back there. Do it. Do your thing. You've got a speech prepared. Let's go, 8. Come on.
I don't have a speech prepared. I don't. In fact, I probably should have, because I should have known that you would like force me to step behind the podium. So nothing annoys me more than when guys, they're almost always guys and they're typically white, just like proclaim loudly and widely that Henry V is the greatest, most courageous hero that ever lived. Like the way that most guys that I hear like describe Henry V, if they know the play and they know that character in Shakespeare, they're like, I want to play him because he's a hero and he conquers France and he's super smart. He's smarter than all the rest of them. And the way they talk about him is like, it's like he's a quarterback of like a UCLA football team who's like also like the president of the frat, and like he's just got everything together and is like there's no flaws. And he gets it, his hair is always perfect. And like the way they describe him is so idealized and so weirdly not how he is characterized in those plays that nothing gets me angrier faster. Because I think that character, I think Shakespeare was incredibly clear-sighted about Hal, in a way that is unsettling. If you want to think of him as a hero, because when you dive into Henry IV parts 1 and 2 and Henry V, what you find is, a profoundly complicated, like kind of ferocious, self-loathing hurricane of a character, who, despite the fact that he is often disgusted with him by himself and the choices he makes, basically like decides that leadership is more important than his humanity. He sort of makes a choice between the two, and he steps up into the role of king, and in the process decides that he's going to Baudelarize like every person who has cared about him, from the lower stations of England. So he is incredibly iconoclastic. He's ruthless. He's cruel. In some instances, he almost seems almost neurotic. But he has this like conviction, this bone deep conviction, that he can lead and that he's supposed to lead. It's just that for most of his life, he doesn't want to know that. He doesn't want to know his own potential, because A, it would be a lot of work, and B, it would mean making his dad proud, and he hates his dad and he wants his dad to suffer for what he, sort of put their family through. And also it will mean leaving a life that is way more fun, a life of partying and debauchery and self-indulgence, which is what he has with Falstaff and friends in Eastcheap. So Hal has this 7 wing that I think he was born with, but that I think was like Falstaff like nurtured it as he grew up. And he likes having fun just a lot, which is I totally resonate with that. He likes being able to just like pretend that the responsibility isn't there, because if he acknowledges that the responsibility is there, then he will also have to acknowledge that he has the capacity to do extraordinary things with that responsibility. But the cost of responsibility is fun and frivolity and a kind of innocence almost. So Henry IV, his dad, the real Henry IV, usurped Richard when they were in their early 30s, and Hal became the heir apparent when he was about 12, 13, and he was the very distant relationship with his father, and his dad at one point actually, like, when Hal's mother died, he was very close to her. His dad wouldn't even return home from a campaign to see her, so she died alone, basically, with Hal as the only one taking care of her. And he was very close to his uncle Richard, who his dad deposed and then basically connived into death. And so Hal has set up this impenetrable brick wall between him and his dad, and he's also set up an impenetrable brick wall around his heart, because when he loves, it is ruined. When he loved his mother, she died. When he loved his uncle, he died. Like, so he sets himself. He alludes to his mother one time in the Henriade, and it is like this fascinating moment that he has with a character who doesn't even matter, who comes in to tell him, like, we're looking for this guy Falstaff who stole a bunch of money, and it was Hal that stole the money from Falstaff, who stole the money from the people who had the money. And Hal talks about mothers once, and this guy says, like, he comes from your father, and he's like, well, give him as much as will be good and send him back again to my mother, who at this point has been dead for about 10 years, because he knows that if that man takes the message to King Henry will be like, oh yeah, I totally screwed over his mother, and that's why he won't come, because he still blames me for what happened to her. So it's just this, like, he is he is trying to make himself believe that he is emotionally invulnerable. Like, he's trying to make himself believe he doesn't even need the heart, or that in order to do what he has to do, he cannot access it. And yet there are moments where he realizes that, like, he can't keep those iron gates around his heart forever. And by the end of Henry V, nor does he want to, because by the end of Henry V, he's seen so much death and destruction. He's like, maybe there's no soul. Maybe there's nothing in me left to salvage. Maybe I really was worthless all along, and I should have just stayed in the taverns where I couldn't hurt anybody. And then he meets Catherine. So it's just this, like, wow. It is that character is like, I need that character, even though I hate him so much, because all of the flaws that I recognize in him, I recognize in myself, and all of his, like, avoidance tendencies and all of his resentments and that anger, he is just frothing with anger in the Henry IV plays. And I think the greatest disservice you can do to the character, if you're playing him, is to play him as the life of the party, because that's just who he is, as opposed to playing him as the life of the party because he has to be, because he can't do the other thing. He cannot let them see how agonized and lonely and self-immolating he is, and he doesn't want to make his dad happy. So he has to conjure up the charisma. He has to be the entertainer and the center of attention, because at least that is safe, right? At least that is at least in those moments he can pretend like he's connecting to people and like he sort of knows his place. But he's so profoundly see the effort that it live it up, as it were, because he's not really happy anywhere. He can't really fit in either world. He's in limbo between them, and he's trying to choose between them. And anyway, he's an 8. And in Henry V, you see him take an army to France and just wreak havoc, basically, because at least it is a goal that he can follow, and at least there's real political reasons for him to do it, because his kingdom's been engulfed in civil war for so long. His dad opened up a huge can of worms when he deposed Richard, and so Hal's like, look, if I give them an enemy that's not me, if I do the alien invasion movie tactic where I'm like, look, the enemy's over there, then that will save him some headache and potentially kind of like strengthen his position on the throne. And also, like, he is actually good at battle. Like, he just is good at it. And that, you know, sort of comes up as early as Henry IV Part 1, where he conquers Hotspur on the battlefield, and you're like, oh, this guy can fight and this guy can lead, and like he's actually quite keen on the battlefield. But in Henry V, like the one time we get a soliloquy from him, the one time he's by himself, he has this weirdly self-pitying monologue soliloquy that is like so long. It is like 2 pages long. And in that monologue, he's like, what makes me different? What makes me different from everybody else? Because it's not, I'm just a person, and being king is just having a bunch of items. I have a throne, I have a ball, I have a scepter thing, I've got a throne that I sit in, I've got some clothes. That's what makes me a king to them. They see those objects. But what is it? Like, how am I different? And he doesn't really get anywhere, but what he does get to is he's like, damn, what makes me different is like I can't sleep at night. That's the difference, is they can sleep and I can't, because I have too much to do. I have too much that I'm responsible for, and I have too much anxiety about not maintaining this illusion that I am somehow above them, even though I know full well I am just as human and just as messy and flawed as all the rest of them. And it literally keeps me up at night. And that for me is like, it is the most fascinating monologue. And for me, it's like a lifeline monologue, because I've never, ever in any other sort of work of fiction found a string of words where I'm like, oh, there I am. There's me. And I felt it the first time I read it, and the first time I saw the play, I was like, wow. And it's just, yeah, it's a really, he's just a gold mine, but at the same time, he's also like a minefield, you know? He's like both at once. Oh my God.
That's quotable.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
So I love him very dearly, and I'm so excited to be directing Richard II this winter, because it's kicking off the Henriade, and very, very soon I'll be able to sort of go on that journey with an actor, which is going to be marvelous. But I'm so sorry. I could talk about him literally all day.
You approach Hal as an 8.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You had the monologue ready. I knew it. I knew it was coming.
I could do it from memory right now.
I'm sure. You know, as you were talking, I have a slightly different read on Henry VIII, or not Henry VIII, Henry V. I have a slightly different read, but I still agree that he's an 8.
Yeah.
And part of that is because I think what people are what I think dudes are responding to when they think Henry VIII is this thing, is that they're actually responding to Henry VIII. I keep saying that. Henry V. Is that they're responding to the Braveheart pieces of that last play.
Right.
And that's the UCLA quarterback part of this, is that
right.
that's the sort of beginning and end. That's because I think, to be generous to those people, that's as long as their memory is. Do you know what I mean? Like, is sort of that short. We see that throughout that play, he burns hot, and when it's hot, it's spectacular. It's all of those things, and that's what sticks in the memory. Yeah. Much more than, say, sending people he would otherwise care about and be gracious to their deaths. And that's we forget about that part, but actually we do that to all of our heroes. And at the same time, a part of my difference in reading that character is I want to give credit to Shakespeare because he's really, really good at hiding his subversion, but I don't think his audience are idiots. And so I think there are some things that he has to sort of push down in that character, even more because he can't say too many dangerous things. He may have to expose us to some of that danger, but he can't be outright. I mean, it's not like he's exploring a tried and true villain of the culture like Richard III. It's a very different thing he's doing. I also think he's despite my belief that he has a sort of, he knows what he wants to do to that character over the course of maybe many plays. It is in development. he is writing a 7 first, and then he's writing an 8. And there are ways for us to sort of go back and sort of rewrite that narrative a little bit. I see him, this may be wrong and unethical, and Kelly can yell at me, but I see him, I see Henry V, Hal, and Prince Harry as really compelling, overlapping sort of characters in time, where like they're put into a situation that they don't want. They have this nasty history that gets them into trouble at times, and then there's like a maturation process that does keep their core identity and that confrontation as part of it, but it does the burn becomes it also becomes a glow. It also becomes like the reason we respect them over time, as opposed to just like somebody who just burns hot and is out, like a Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Well, I think if you stay true to it, that's what matters, and that's what people see.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the things that I think I myself especially value in 8s, is that you know where you stand. Like you always, they're very true to, what they've decided or what they've committed their lives to, or whatever. Like that doesn't change. It's up to you to not betray them, or, whatever. Like if you step out of the boundary that has been established, then that will jeopardize your position with them, but you always know where they stand. And I think that clarity is hard to find in people.
Oh, absolutely. But I think that's why he doesn't choose. See, that's where we disagree, Jeremy, is I think that from the very beginning, from Henry IV Part 1, when he has that first soliloquy where he's like, I get it. I know what you're thinking. But it's okay. I've got a plan. Which I don't know if it's a plan so much as what he tells himself out loud so he can sleep at night. Like, I don't know how much he believes it, but he does say it. But I think that's why he doesn't choose, Kelly, is because if he chose, he would know that he would then have to do everything in his power to live up to it. Like if he chose to be king, like if he chose to actually do what his dad wants and like step up and be a leader, he would have to give it everything he has because that's who he is. So he just delays that. He's like, how long can I avoid making that choice? Because once I do, I'm stuck. And that's how I feel, is like when I was growing up, I was like, I would procrastinate so much on stuff by doing stupid stuff. Like I would like party and stuff. And it was because I was like, if I admit to myself that I want to do this thing for real, that's it. I don't get to have fun anymore because I'm going to be so driven to do that thing that I'm not going to get to feel like I'm just someone's friend and I'm just having fun. And so I put it off. And it wasn't until this year, actually, talking to the person I'm going to be interviewing later. And he was like, what's the thing that you're not saying? And I was like, the thing I'm not saying is that I think I'm going to change the world. And then I said it and I was like, oh, fuck. I can't take that back now. I can't. But I had avoided saying it. Like I'd avoided thinking like I have the potential to do something amazing and transformative because I was like, if I say it, I have to do it.
Claire, I want to hug you. I love that. Yeah. I think that's so powerful. That's amazing. That's so great.
Yeah, that's how I read him. And I would be so remiss if I didn't mention the name of the person who like helped me come to this with Hal. So Daniel Jose Molina, you're not listening, but thank you for playing Hal and Henry V at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival from 2017 to like 2018. I appreciate it so much. I know you didn't do it for me, but thank you so much, because from the moment that first scene with Falstaff, they had it in like a and so sopping wet and his like hair was dripping, and he stood alone on that stage and he did that first soliloquy, and literally every line of the soliloquy just meant, yeah, it's okay, I hate myself too. That was what we got from that first soliloquy. It was like, yeah, it's okay, I hate myself too. And then we went from there to like to Henry V. And so thank you for doing that. You're not listening, but if you ever do,
awesome.
I appreciate it very much.
Okay, we have one more.
Nines
tomorrow.
9.
I have 1 9 that has already surfaced to the top of my list.
Oh, okay.
Also from a history play. So
from a history play. Is it H6?
No. But I also know I'm 100% right about it. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. We're back. So all the 9 should join us. We'll have a very quiet party in the background.
Agreeable.
Yeah.
Everything will be fine.
He-
Everything will
fine.
go unmentioned.
We might take a nap.
Yeah. It'll be great. So we're back with 9s next time.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll see you later.
Thank you both. Thanks, everybody.
guys.
TFN.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Sweet Tea Shakespeare Hours. Our podcast was produced by Claire Martin and Jeremy Feebig. Ashanti Bennett is our general manager. Our theme song was written by Owen Eddy. This podcast was made possible by our friends at the Arts Council of Fayetteville and Cumberland County and our fabulous monthly sustainers at patreon.com/sweetteashakes. You can join us there for an exclusive weekly podcast and loads of other fun perks. If you've enjoyed your time with us today, subscribe to this podcast or leave us a review on whatever platform you get your podcasts from. If you want to hang out with us in a future episode, drop us a line at hours@sweetteashakespeare.com. That's HOURS@sweetteashakespeare.com. Thanks again for listening to the Sweet Tea Shakespeare Hours. Until next time, you that way, we this way.